Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the Hammer Territory Podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Saturday afternoon / evening here at the beginning of January in 2025. It's not quite an emergency episode of the podcast, but it is episode 132, and it's a solo episode. It'll be a short one as well. In fact, it's kind of impromptu. I toyed with doing this last night on Friday, chose to wait for it a little bit, came back again on Saturday afternoon. We'll go back to our regular scheduled programming a little bit later on this weekend. We're hoping to have an episode that is more traditional, let's just say, on Sunday into Monday. But the big news of the weekend for the Braves is that there'll be a pretty much an entrenched member of the team the last 4 seasons that will not be returning to Atlanta, with Charlie Morton, old pal, signing a 1-year deal with the Baltimore Orioles for $15 million. And if you follow the podcast for any length of time, you will know that there's a reason why I'm doing a solo episode on this one, is that Charlie is seen as, and it's probably fair, that he's my guy in some respects. Now, it's become sort of a bit in the last few years, and I've been, reasonable, I hope, about what Charlie is and what he isn't at this point in time at age 41. And basically, we did kind of expect that Morton could be moving on either to retirement or going somewhere else. There's been reporting to that end. This is not a big surprise, let's just say. But ultimately, him signing a deal to keep pitching and not pitch with the Braves is not shocking, but it's certainly different, and it kind of tells you where things are. Broadly, my first reaction was, wow, Charlie's gone. My second reaction was, that's a lot of money for Charlie Morton. 1 year, $15 million is not crazy. If the Braves had given him that contract, it would have been considerable, to be sure. I think the fan base would have not reacted very well to that, as we'll get into more in a second. But I will also say this, it's not a crazy deal. And I think that's probably a little bit more than the Braves wanted to offer. I would imagine, and this is not super source, but if you follow the tea leaves, read behind the scenes, talk to people that might know things, if the Braves had matched this deal, I have a feeling that Charlie would still be a Brave. So if you want to factor that into the ongoing angst with regard to some Braves fans and Alex Gonzalez right now, people are not happy with Alex in the front office. There's definitely a mixture there. We talked about that ad nauseum on the show the last several weeks about how, yes, it's been a while, but also it's early January and you don't want to panic just yet. I would encourage that anyway. Just because nothing's happened so far does not mean nothing is going to happen. With that said, if you get to February, mid-February, late February, and nothing's going on there, we have said, and I'll say it again right now, it will not be received well for us if the Braves are quiet all winter long. With that said, there's no shame in this not being matched by the Braves. I would imagine the Braves made an offer to Charlie at some point in time. It was probably a relatively modest one. And $15 million to join a contending team. Like the Orioles are not a rebuilding team. I would not have been surprised at all if Charlie retired, if there was nothing else out there for him. Baltimore is the combination of a team that has a ton of young talent and also a pretty dire need for starting pitching. Even more so than the Braves have the need for it. The Braves have a much better rotation than the Orioles do at this point in time. In fact, even after you add Morton in to the Orioles, they're still I think, bottom third of the league rotation in terms of projections at Fangraphs. Even with Morton is basically their third starter right away, which is different. In Atlanta, he would have been their fifth guy, and that's the reality of what the Braves need, quote unquote. That obviously could add more than that, but at the same time, I think Morton is probably best suited on a good team at this point to be a fourth or fifth starter. That's what he is. And, this won't be a super long reaction, but I want to just say, there's been some, I would say, not necessarily inaccuracy, but just kind of just unreasonable expectations for Morton in the last couple of years. Even last year, and look, 2024 Charlie Morton was not the same pitcher as 2021 Charlie Morton. That is not up for debate. Even I would certainly and, eagerly acknowledge that fact. But he was still a perfectly reasonable back-end rotation guy last season. He made 30 starts. He threw more than 160 innings. He had more than a strikeout per inning for the season. He had an ERA in the low fours. Fangraphs WAR above 1. Very solid. Nothing great at all. He isn't going to be a ceiling raiser for you at this point in time. But even projection-wise, Morton is projected right now, according to Fangraphs depth chart projections, for an ERA in the low fours, a WAR total in the mid ones, 1.4 right now, with 150 in terms of innings, back end rotation help, depth. And the Braves probably chose to not go that direction, being that the price was what it was. And that's a very reasonable distinction, even as the guy that is the Morton defender resident, basically, on this podcast. And I got a lot of responses from people on social media reaching out to me. No, I was not upset at all. I'll say that now. Like, just broadly speaking, this does not bother me in the slightest. Good for Charlie. Charlie has been fantastic. We'll get into in a second. His time with the Braves went extremely well. He did give the Braves a ton of different value added things behind the scenes, on the field, etc. And it's also fine for the Braves not to pay him $15 million at age 41. That's also totally fine with me. So that's my broad takeaway to this. It makes sense for Morton. He gets to be a part of a good team with a chance to win, a bigger part that he would have been in Atlanta. He'll be relied upon more, and he got paid. And that combination is what you want if you are an aging pitcher like Charlie Morton is. Now, the rest of this kind of has to do with where things are and where things stand. But first, a little bit of reflection on the Charlie Morton era in Atlanta. He was with the Braves for 4 seasons. He joined Atlanta after the COVID shortened 2020 season, which he spent with Tampa Bay, and before that with Houston and Philadelphia. Before that, Pittsburgh before that, and of course he actually began his career in Atlanta. In 2008, he came up with the Braves, debuted, was not good. He was a Braves prospect long ago. He's one of the few players that's still older than I am, so I'm holding out hope on that. That there will still be somebody in the league that I can cover that's older than I am. Alas, 4 years of Charlie Morton, and here are his numbers in that time. He put up 9.7 Fangraphs WAR in 4 seasons with the Braves. Now, that may not seem like an incredible number to anyone, not just casually speaking. That was number 34 in Major League Baseball among pitchers in a league that has 30 teams. So if you do the math on that, he was a high-end number 2 starter by the actual pecking order. 34th cumulative WAR in 4 seasons, 30-team league. Pretty much everyone ahead of him is not necessarily an ace, but like a high level pitcher. Worth noting, that's pretty impressive. I saw some people reacting like a good riddance or whatever. I get it. The end wasn't as good as the beginning, but he was a very valuable pitcher for the Braves across 4 seasons. He also finished that 4-season run 13th in baseball in innings pitched. He was very consistent in Atlanta. In fact, Charlie had at least 30 starts in all 4 seasons. The lowest innings total was 163 for Morton in 4 seasons. And yes, there are diminishing returns at some point, but you want, and obviously you want to have a guy be effective when he's out there. But that steadiness, that rock solidness, and people have mentioned this already, and I know we have 2 on the podcast, losing as many starts and innings as Charlie Morton and Max Fried gave the Braves is not easy to fix. Max is different circumstance, obviously. He got paid a ton of money, and rightfully so, in New York. No issue there. Also, with the Braves passing on matching that kind of number, it was a very, very large contract that he got from the Yankees. With that said, it's a big hole now being filled by everybody else. But, durability, consistency, he was never bad in Atlanta. Yeah, did he have a bad month, bad 6 weeks? Sure. But all 4 seasons, he was an effective starter. 2 years were better than the other 2. 2021 was the best year. Not surprising, because that was his youngest season. He was 37 at that point in time. He was awesome that year. And, of course, he was a huge factor in the Braves winning the World Series, which should net you goodwill for a long time. For whatever reason, that goodwill kind of evaporated on Charlie in some corners of the Braves fan base. But how about this? That season, he threw 185 innings with a 3.34 ERA and a 3.18 FIP. He was a 4.5 win pitcher in 2021. That's a star level player. Not an absolute uber ace, but I believe he was in the top 15 or 20 in the league in pitching WAR that year. He was an awesome pitcher that season. Then you go to the playoffs. He made 4 starts in the playoffs with a 3.24 ERA during a World Series run. Before, and here's where it gets even crazier if you don't remember this, and you should probably, but he breaks his leg in the World Series and goes on to throw 16 pitches on a broken leg in the World Series. That's legendary stuff. And they won the World Series. Like, it's one of those things where I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. Obviously, there's problems with that in general. They famously lost a Super Bowl in memorable fashion. But my comp would be Falcons center Alex Mack. Great Pro Bowl level player. played in the Super Bowl on a broken leg. Like, was literally playing on a broken leg in the Super Bowl. And that has been largely forgotten other than diehards because they lost. That's just the reality. They blew the 25-point lead, all those things. In Charlie's case, it's one of the things that could be forgotten if you lose. They won the World Series. Now, was he the only reason why they won? No, obviously not. But he was awesome in the playoffs, awesome in the regular season, and then threw 16 pitches on a broken leg in the World Series. Crazy stuff. So anyway, a farewell to Charlie. Really an impressive run in Atlanta. Like, obviously, he's not like a Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz level figure with the Braves. Max Fried's highs were higher than Charlie's highs. He was around for longer. But 4 years of high level value for a veteran guy, and that's before you get into the off the field stuff. Which, by the way, Charlie is revered by the media, by his teammates. He's very introspective, family guy, like just an awesome guy by all accounts. So salute to you, Charlie Morton. From there, the Braves, of course, have this issue with the rotation where I think it's overstated in some circles, but also understated in some other circles. There's a needle to thread here between the Braves are fine, quote unquote, in the rotation, but also the Braves need some help in the rotation. And I feel this. I feel both of those things are true. This is probably a little bit too convenient, and you can certainly argue with this placement, but at the moment, I am looking right now on Saturday afternoon at the Fangraphs depth chart projections at starting pitcher. There are exactly 2 teams in baseball projected to have a better and more valuable rotation than the Braves right now. Those 2 teams are the Phillies and the Dodgers. The Phillies have Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez, Suarez, and Luzardo. That's a very firm top 5, including a couple stars in Wheeler and Nola, in particular Wheeler, who was awesome last year, was number 2 in Cy Young voting. And then the Dodgers have the Dodgers embarrassment of riches: Snell, Yamamoto, Glasnow. Otani's going to pitch this year. Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, Bobby Miller, etc. They're loaded as they always are. After that, it's the Braves. Now, if you want to tell me you would rather have the Rangers with DeGrom and Eovaldi and Gray, sure. Or if you want to rather have the Red Sox with Crochet and Bueller and Bello, like, sure, that's fine. Twins are good too. Pablo Lopez. There are good rotations around baseball. The Yankees have Cole, Fried, and Rodon. Obviously a great trio, etc. But the Braves are number 3 on this projection list, and there's not really anything that I could say that's like super against that projection. Now, there is some projection in there. That's kind of a different phrase. Chris Sale was the Cy Young winner this last year. He was awesome. I would think he'll be awesome again, but it's not a lock that he's awesome again. At his age in particular, and with the injury stuff that he's had in the past, but he was awesome this last year, a guy that you can bank on. Ronaldo Lopez, breakout last year. For the record, they're projecting some significant regression for Lopez. A 3.9 ERA is what I'm looking at right now on the projection page for Fangraphs, but that is still a good pitcher. Not as good as it was last year when he had a probably unsustainable ERA, but a good pitcher nonetheless. Then you have Schwellenbach, the breakout of last year, who I really fully buy into, honestly. He was a rookie of the year level guy last year. Didn't win it, but there you go. And then Spencer Strider. So Strider's, there's some uncertainty, but when he's back, I expect him to be good. Now, how good? Will he be as dominant as he was when he was at his absolute peak a couple years ago? Maybe not. But a Cy Young level guy when he's available. Now, that's only 4 guys, and only 3 of them are healthy right now. Strider won't pitch again, probably until the end of April. We'll see. And then the Braves have some other guys who Fangraphs does think are like reasonable facsimiles. Grant Holmes is at the lead of that. Ian Anderson, who we talked about on the most recent show with myself and Steven. Ian is out of options. If you missed that show, by the way, listen to that podcast. But if you missed it, Ian is out of options, so it's kind of a parallel situation. He could get traded. We'll see there, but he's at least in the mix there. Then you have Smith Shawver. You have Hurston Waldrop. You have Bryce Elder. Then you get into like the Alan Winans, Dylan Dodd tier, whatever. Some of the guys are not great, but still, they have a bunch of depth for sure in the rotation. I say all that. If they open the season right now with this rotation, I would be underwhelmed, but it's still a good rotation. Both can be true at the same time. I saw my friend Grant McCauley, who's been on this podcast before, I'm sure he'll be back on again, talk about this today extensively on Twitter, where he basically said, and I agree with this, the Braves need to add a proven starter. I've been banging that drum all winter long. In fact, I would say they probably need to get 2 to be safe, but at least one guy you can actually credibly put in the rotation on opening day or that opening week and plug in. But Grant pulled this number I thought was really interesting. Over the last 2+ seasons, the Braves have thrown it's like 137 starts from guys that you don't want to have throw starts, basically in the history. And I won't name them all now, but it's the Dodd, Winans, Vines, Elder, Smith Shawver, Huascar Noah, Jaco DeRizzi, like all of the flotsam like depth names that the Braves have used the last 2+ years. And Grant I trust Grant. He says the Braves are 75-62 when those guys start the last 2+ years. Now, part of that is that in 2023, they had arguably the best offense of all time. So that covers up some of that, I'm sure. This last year, the numbers were not that good when they were not throwing the good pitchers. But the Braves have better depth than most teams do. And it is as underwhelmed as I am by some of the depth guys on this roster. Like, for instance, Ian Anderson is a great example we talked about on the most recent episode. Ian is not a guy that I am in love with being in the rotation for the Braves right now. But for like probably 10 teams in the league, he would be their 4th, 5th starter, like pretty clearly, and would be a reasonable guy to put there. For the Braves, he's like their 7th guy right now, and we'll see. But they do have depth there. So, yeah, losing Charlie it's not about losing Charlie. It's just an opportunity to talk about this topic a little bit. But losing Charlie is not a death knell. They can replace him with someone that's available and what he's been giving the Braves at least the last season or so. Before that, probably a little bit higher level. But last year, he was a plug-and-play, reliable, but not spectacular back-end starter. So the takeaway is the Braves need to do something in the rotation. That has not changed. That was the case before Charlie signs somewhere else. It's the case now. I do like their top 4 a lot. You throw in guys that I think are reasonable, like Holmes, like Anderson. Smith Shawver and Waldrop are a little bit more volatile right now, I would say, but obviously high upside guys. Even Bryce Elder, who I've poked plenty of fun of for being an all-star and how that was never sustainable. And I was yelled at a lot back then for saying he wasn't that good because he's not that good, but he is a capable 5th starter in a lot of rotations. He's not exciting. He's not very good, I don't think, but he's a non-embarrassing option. So all that said, they have depth, but they do need another guy. We talked about that a lot on the recent episode with myself and Scott Coleman, where we discussed the state of the free agency market. And it's been pretty quiet across baseball since then. Some guys have signed, but mostly it's come to a screeching halt over the holidays. Maybe it kicks up again as baseball front offices kind of reopen this coming week. But in the meantime, the Braves are where they've been the whole time, and we'll see how they kind of reflect from here. But they do need help in the rotation, but they're not in a disastrous place in the rotation at the same time. So there you go. All right, I will be done ranting and rambling now, but one more time, shouts to Charlie Morton. Obviously, I'm doing this podcast with a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek. It isn't a emergency episode. I'm not crying for people that were checking on me. It's kind of funny that they were. It's totally fine. This happened. If they could have paid Charlie 1 year at $8 million to bring him back, I would have been all about that. Even 1 year, $10 million would have been totally fine with me. $15 million is a lot for Charlie Morton. That's objectively true. So no issues at all. And we'll see how Alex responds. I have, as I keep saying on the podcast, but I have found some joy and also like real bewilderment with some of the reactions from fans about how Alex is just like quitting or something, and Alex is bad at his job. I get it. The angst is real, but I will still be relatively patient and just kick the can down the road. If they get down to February, and we've teased that out before, but it still stands. If the Braves are running this roster that they have right now into spring training, I'll have some serious questions. In the meantime, I'm not panicking just yet, and we'll leave it there. All right. Please subscribe to Hammer Territory Forward Podcast if you have not done that already. It's usually not a solo endeavor. In fact, it's very rare that we do a solo podcast. We do have 4 hosts of the show. It's myself, it's Scott Coleman, it's Sean Coleman, it's Stephen Tolbert. Usually at least 2 of us on the podcast, occasionally 3, occasionally even beyond that, we can have 4. But I thought that it's a Saturday afternoon. People are busy. I wasn't going to have somebody tap in on basically a bonus podcast, what this amounts to. But farewell to Charlie Morton. Shouts to you, my friend. And please stay tuned. Please subscribe. Tell your friends. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're also on social media, but basically everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, all those places. We're at Hammer Territory across the board. Follow me if you want to at BT Roland. I also have a Patreon. I do it's mostly Atlanta Hawks stuff, but occasionally a Braves thing there at patreon.com/BT Roland. And all right, we'll sign off right now. Thanks for listening, everybody. Well, we plan to have a show. I'll say plan because it's never done until it's done. We plan to have a show on Sunday into Monday. Hopefully that will happen. But no matter what, you can find the podcast easier if you subscribe to the show. It will be delivered to you with ease. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you all next time.